Hi everyone, welcome back to Vidik. Today I'm here with Morgan Hannaleck. Now I'll be honest with you, before anything else, the first thing that I wanted to talk to Morgan about was her wonderful smile. She has these beautiful set of pearls. Look at that, look at that. I saw that, I'm like, okay, now this is what I call positive vibrations, and I believe in vibes. That's what I got from you. And then yeah, that's how we started talking, and then now we're here. And Morgan, you're into body positivity, you're into healthy food, but of a different kind. You whatever fits the body, whatever you want to eat. You're about mental health, right?
Yeah.
Podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And recently I saw on Amazon that you've written a book as well. What is that?
I did, yeah.
What is that about?
So when I was 16, I started documenting my own struggles with an eating disorder and depression and anxiety. And when I turned 20 years old, I kind of formulated them into a book, and then I published it.
You published a book at 20.
Yeah.
that gives me some some form of complex. Yeah, I haven't written a book yet, but I would love to. I would love to read it as soon as it's available. I think it's on Kindle, right?
Yeah, if you have a Kindle, you can get it for free.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it. All right. So I want to start off with talking about orthorexia. Am I pronouncing it right? Is that ortho or ortho? Orthorexia. Yep. What is that like, and how was the journey for you with orthorexia?
So orthorexia can really be hidden in the form of media and kind of praise as a healthy lifestyle, when in reality, orthorexia is characterized by someone that only eats foods that they perceive as to be clean. So it kind of goes with that rigid food rule type of process as you eat. So when I struggled with orthorexia, there were foods that seemed off limits to me. I labeled a lot of foods as good and bad, and I didn't allow myself a lot of foods. So with orthorexia, you miss out on a lot of life because of it. I mean, we use food for a lot of things. We use food to celebrate. We use food to bond with people. And when you're struggling with orthorexia, that can prevent you from really living in those moments because you're very preoccupied with the content of the food, and you want to make sure that it's what you would call clean. So that's why I think it can be really hidden in the media, because there's a lot of fitness influencers that kind of promote it in a sense.
Correct. But you are into fitness as well, right? Like you keep posting workout videos, and we cannot deny that foods are important, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure.
So how do you balance that? So do you say you should eat anything you want, or do you still have certain set of rules, just less stricter?
So I follow intuitive eating. I don't know if you ever heard of intuitive eating or the 10 principles of intuitive eating.
Oh, that I haven't.
You haven't? No, okay. So essentially there are 10 principles, and they all are around honoring your body, and that includes nutritional needs and what you're craving. So it's finding that balance between giving your body nourishing nutritional foods and also allowing your body to eat things that maybe aren't as nutritionally dense, but will satisfy any sort of cravings or desires that you may have. And that can keep you from getting in this vicious cycle where, as if you're restricting some sort of food group, when you do have that forbidden food, you're much likely to binge on it. And then there's a cycle of restricting certain foods out of your diet, having that food, and your body is so deprived of it that it wants to binge. And then it's just this vicious cycle. Whereas in intuitive eating, you're honoring your body's internal hunger cues and what you're craving in that moment. And you don't really have the opportunity to binge because you're always satisfying your body and not depriving it of any kind of food or nutrient.
Yes, but from this I'm taking that for one to start intuitive eating, you obviously can see your intuitions, right? You know what you want to eat. However, you need to have some basic knowledge about it. So where did your knowledge come from? How did you get started? Were you into modeling before this?
Yeah, so my knowledge on it was kind of an accident, but I'm definitely a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. So when I struggled with my eating disorder, I was struggling with anorexia nervosa, which is characterized by restriction of foods. And then I kind of shifted from having anorexia nervosa into orthorexia, where I wasn't restricting the amount of food, but the content of the food. So I wouldn't let myself have foods that I had perceived as bad in that time in my life. And as I began to recover more and introduce those foods that I believed were forbidden and would do all these awful negative things to me.
But how did you come to believe they were forbidden? Sorry to break you there.
I think, no, it's totally fine. I think it's a combination of how I was raised and the media. And because a lot of the media, like we said, a lot of fitness influencers encourage only eating foods that they perceive to be clean or healthy. So that kind of engraved in my head, well, if I eat foods that aren't 100% clean or healthy, and I keep putting quotations on this because there's no such thing as good or bad food, but that's what the media teaches us. And when I saw that, I actively believed that that was my truth. And I thought that those foods that I thought were forbidden would be bad and they would make me gain weight or whatever other negative effects I assumed they would have.
So you did have an image of yourself imagining as if gaining weight is a bad thing, essentially. That's something that you believed in earlier?
Yes, I did. And although I don't believe that now, I do think diet culture really fed into that because along with the media and my upbringing, I was taught to believe that gaining weight was associated with being unlovable or unworthy, when in reality, that's not true. But that feeds into the diet culture.
That is extremely bad, no? And I'll be honest with you here. Because Vidik, as the name suggests, it's perspectives, right? And here's my perspective about it. I don't think we should promote getting fat either. Fat shaming, completely against that. It's a horrible thing to do. However, we do have fat promotion going on. That's one thing I do not agree with because, see, I want people to be healthy. Of course, your body, your choice, do what you want. But if it's wrong, don't promote it. For example, let's take a slightly extreme one. Like we promote being fat on one end, correct? By having plus size models. Of course, one of the intentions of plus size models is to make others feel comfortable who are fat, who cannot lose weight. And maybe the other side to it is where people think it's okay to be fat, even though you have a choice to become healthier and be influenced from your side. It's like saying, I want to promote smoking cigarettes because it's my body, my choice. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, I totally understand where you're going with that. And I think that it really depends because have you ever heard of health at every size?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard
so that goes into the fact that you can be any weight and it doesn't mean that you're healthy. So I think when you're coming into just living in a larger body and some people promoting it, I think that when you're saying you disagree with it, it sounds like you're saying that you disagree with promoting the negative health effects of sometimes living in a larger body. And I do think that it really varies from person to person because some people can live in larger bodies and be healthy. And some people can live in smaller bodies and not be healthy. So I do think it really depends on person to person. However, with your analogy with the cigarette, I understand where you're getting at in that analogy.
So in that case, how do we go about it? I'm asking a worldview. How do we deal with such people? Such people as in, for example, let's take a plus size model. I forgot her name. There's one that's always on my mind. Anyway, a plus size model, right? A lot of them just, they promote.
I think it really depends on her health. I mean, you can be a plus size model and still be healthy.
Yes. Correct. Again. Yeah, I agree. So then this comes to personal discretion, right? So for a person who's viewing the model, for the model, it might be okay. She, of course, is living a lavish life. She has 10 people around her who are taking care of her health. But for the other people at home who are not as healthy, don't you think it's the duty of people who are promoting something like this to educate people that although health at all sizes is real, the probability favors that you lose a couple pounds of weight. Just like probability favors that if you don't smoke, you won't get cancer. There are people who smoke all their life and don't get cancer.
Yeah, I think that goes right into this, just depending on the person and what their current health of where their current health is in the first place. I get what you're saying. Whereas if someone,
you do, right? Yeah.
Yeah, if someone's living in a larger body and they're suffering from a lot of different negative health issues, then
Yes.
yeah, I can see where that would be a problem when they're not educating and they're just promoting. But
Correct.
if someone's living in a larger body and they're perfectly healthy, I don't see an issue with
that's absolutely perfectly fine. That should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is where the world is right now. We're trying to find a balance. We're going a little overboard, pulling back a little harder. We're going a little bit overboard, pulling back a little harder.
It's difficult to find that happy medium, and it's a really touchy subject to be able to talk about it and find a place where people feel safe to talk about it, and it's also sensitive to people in all different kinds of bodies.
I agree. I personally do not have a body which I can, shoot the next James Bond movie with. However, until a long time, I was pretty uncomfortable with showing it outside. I thought, it's not the right thing to do. It's not cool. No, it's not. I don't have the seventh pack. I don't have a six pack. What will people say? I came with that mindset. So I believe you might have something to say about that mindset that people are not comfortable in their own skin. No matter how fit a person is, they aren't comfortable. How does one get comfortable in their own skin?
I think that really depends on your own journey and where you are in your acceptance of your body, because there have been times where I've been at a lower body fat percentage and I was not as healthy as I am now. And that's because you can eat all the vegetables you want, but if you're not handling what's going on in your head, you're not going to be healthy, because that mental health is just as important as the physical health. So I think feeling comfortable in your skin is accepting and trusting where your body would like to be and letting it be there non-judgmentally and freely.
Yes. And one of your captions, you posted that I don't have anybody to tell me that my body is the least interesting thing about me.
Yeah.
I love that. That is so empowering in itself.
It's true. I mean, when I was growing up, I was thinking, well, like, I'm going to be defined through my body. People are going to like me through my body. People are going to want to be associated with me through my body. When I look at me now, and there's so much more to me that has absolutely nothing to do with my body. Like, I'm an interesting person. I have a lot to me, and all the things that I'm thinking of in my head that make me have literally nothing to do with how I look.
Absolutely. And I think as a 16-year-old, that's when your problem started, or that's when...
Yeah, 16.
How did it start? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I was raised in an environment where we didn't talk about our feelings. Mm-hmm. And all that really mattered was that I was healthy and safe on the outside. Yes. I mean, my parents wanted to know where I was, what I was doing, was I getting good grades, but they never wanted to know if I was happy. I never really got asked about that emotional part. So I started off in an environment where I was really suppressing a lot of things, and I didn't feel like I was in a safe place to talk about what I was feeling or what I was going through. And starting off in that environment made me a lot more susceptible to developing a mental health problem, because I didn't really have an outlet to express myself. Yes. And I didn't really have anyone to tell me that the things I was struggling with were normal. I mean, I thought I was really abnormal for feeling things really, really extreme. And I talk about that a lot, where I know that I'm someone with really, really extreme emotions. And I look at that now. Back then I looked at it as a weakness, but right now I look at it as a strength, because I know that I have the capacity to care so much about something, to feel really passionate about something, to love so powerfully. But when I was growing up, I thought it was my weakness, because at the same time, I also felt really sad. When I'm sad, I was sad. When I was mad, I was mad. I didn't understand it. I didn't have anyone to say, like, hey, these emotions are normal. And if anything, it's your strength, because you have the capacity to put a lot of positive emotions into the world. And so I started off with that. And then a lot of relationships were coming in and out of my life that made me feel like I wasn't enough, and made me feel really out of control in my life. So I started to use food in my body and exercise to be able to feel in control, because those were the things I could control. I couldn't control that my friends left me out of their lunch table. I couldn't control that my boyfriend broke up with me and didn't want to date me anymore. I couldn't control that my parents didn't understand me. But what I could control was what I ate and how much of it I ate. That was my control in my life.
Mm-hmm. So since you couldn't control these external things, you try to control something internal. But what you demonstrated here, Morgan, is something really beautiful. I would like to point that out. So in stressful situations and things that aren't going your way, especially during the COVID crisis right now, it's really important that we change the narrative in our own head.
Yeah.
And that's what you did. It's beautifully demonstrated there. And as a 16-year-old, you started doing that. Must have taken some power, some courage. And let me know if I'm diving too deep into it, but I read that there's alcoholism that runs in your family.
Yeah, there is. My dad is a recovering alcoholic for the last 30 years. So there's already that genetic factor that makes me susceptible to developing mental illness or just the reliance on some sort of addiction, because an eating disorder in a sense is an addiction. I mean,
Yes.
we rely on it as a coping mechanism. Like when I look back, my eating disorder was a really negative coping mechanism, and that's very similar with alcoholism. So I already had that genetic factor, which really fueled the fire. It was kind of like my genes kind of loaded the gun, and then my environment just pulled that trigger on me.
Holy shit. You were forced by nature to be to be an alcoholic, but you recovered from that. That's some level of motivation, guys. Here there are people who are texting me, Sidhant, in COVID crisis, I cannot do without that cigarette, without that alcohol. And here's you, who's genetically enabled to be addicted, and yet you're fighting through it. What was your...
Yeah, I think that goes with kind of using your characteristics either with or against you. I mean, I have a lot of characteristics that could very easily make me want to destroy myself and do a lot of negative things to myself. And I have that there, and I can channel that into a more positive thing, which is kind of how my recovery really got started. I started channeling all that energy I had for self-destruction into self-love, but it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it took a very long time, but I slowly started to put it into better things.
Yes, but if there was one day or one night that you could remember that... See, what I believe, Morgan, is changes happen over time. Yes, but the decision to change happens in a second, in a split second. Do you remember when you made that decision? What made you make that decision?
I do remember one day. It was probably one of the worst days of my eating disorder. And I was doing really bad, and I started to really think about everything that was happening with me, how I couldn't live a normal life because of my eating disorder. And I was so under the belief that it made me happy, it made me unique, it made me special, it made me determined, and those were things other people didn't have. And then I started to realize that it was actually controlling me. I wasn't controlling it. And that's when I actually reached out to my parents, and I was like, hey, I need help. And although my parents didn't really understand me, they definitely cared about me and loved me and wanted to get me help. So from there, they took the initiative to help me get an evaluation at a treatment center. And that's when everything changed. It was like in the middle of that breakdown, there was like 5 seconds where I was courageous enough to be like, hey, I need help. And afterward, I wanted to take it all back because a huge percentage of me wanted to stay sick. But that really small part of me that wanted to get better spoke out in that moment. And afterward, I couldn't take it back. And because I have such loving, amazing parents that want to help me, they took on that call for help, and they helped me.
Wonderful. You said there was a small part of you that wanted to remain sick. Now, oftentimes when we are sick, we do not know that we are sick. Now, when you had the small part within you saying that it's okay to remain sick, were you aware that you were sick, or was there some part of you that still thought, no, this is okay, maybe it's just a phase that I'm going through?
Yeah, I think I started off, I'm very visual. So say this much of me started off being sick and wanting to stay sick and defining myself through being sick. And as I suffered and started to make the realizations that I was sick and wanted to get better, this much of this part of me was like, I want to get better. And as I started to do the work to get better, this part started to grow and started to take over that part of me that wanted to stay sick. And it definitely took a lot of time, but as long as you have that really small part of you that wants to get better, you can take that and you can grow on that. and you can work with that, and that part can grow and overcome the part of you that wants to stay sick.
Yeah, people do have that part within them, but the difficult part is listening to it and allows that little bit, that little ray of hope to become bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think your parents played a major role in that part becoming bigger, or is that something else you did along with it?
I think that I was a kid. I didn't have the resources to help get myself better, and I do think my parents played a big role in the fact that they were able to help me get that resource. And that's why that trusted adult is so important, especially if you're a child or adolescent struggling, because they have access to the resources that you need to get better. So I do think my parents played that big role in kind of setting everything in motion, where they got me that initial resource. And from there, I think that was kind of my responsibility at that point.
So how much of you is now healthy or not sick? Are you fully?
I would say this is me. I would say this much of me, because I do think there's still a part of me that definitely struggles, and it's definitely very important that I keep up with my own self-care to be able to prevent that part from growing back and taking over again, because I do know, like we said, I am genetically susceptible to mental illness. So I do think that the majority of me has worked so hard to become healthy. And there is that very small part of me that's lingering, that's like waiting for that moment where it can take over again. But I've developed so many protective factors to let that happen.
That's good. But when you're saying this and this, my Indian mathematical brain was going haywire. Like, how do we calculate this? Is that 17 or 18%?
I would say like 95.
95.5. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. My OCD is quiet now.
Good.
Do you have any mental health practices to remain in this state? Because as a mindset coach myself, I do realize how easy it is to go back to your old habits and old patterns. Because once it's registered, it's somewhere there. You just kind of forget it goes away, but you still need to keep doing something, right? To keep reinforcing.
For sure.
What do you do?
I mean, you can't just completely neglect all the work you've done in maintaining your mental health and self-care, or else it's a lot easier to slip back into everything that you worked so hard to get away from. Yes. So that's why I think it's really important to keep up with it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any practices to keep up with it?
I think there's a combination of things, because I've learned to develop my own positive coping skills and things that have worked for me, and that's taken a lot of trial and error. But there are a lot of things, such as I realized I really like to be outside and hike. I realized that I really like to write. I realized that I really like to paint. I realized that I really like building meaningful connections with friends. And I think the list can go on really long, but I created my own toolbox of positive coping skills and started adding to that throughout the years as I've explored what I need as a person and the emotional needs that need to be met and how I can get there.
Correct. Do you have any actionable tips with anybody else who wants to get where you are, who is where you were, who wants to get where you are? How can they start with their own journey, and what things they can practice themselves? Because I'm sure you took 2 years to figure out your own positive practices. How can someone else do it faster? Is the only way to experience new things, or is there some other things that you could tell them?
I think so. When I look back, there are definitely things that I wish I had done sooner that I think would have kind of sped up my recovery rate. So for sure, I think I definitely stayed in a comfort zone longer than I think I should have. So there are a lot of things that I was scared to do and scared to try and scared to take that jump on, because that comfort zone was my safety net, and taking that safety net away was really, really scary. And I think if I had done it sooner, I would have recovered sooner and made more memories and received more of the positive gifts recovery has to offer if I had done that sooner. So I think that if someone's watching this and they want to be able to recover, I think my advice, coming from someone that has recovered at a slow pace, is to just take that jump and do those things that are uncomfortable. Because that comfort zone, I mean, it's a great place. It feels great. It feels safe, but nothing really grows there. I mean, you have to step outside of it and feel discomfort to be able to kind of build that tolerance up and be able to endure more. And then you grow from there.
Beautiful. Exactly. Exactly. It's all about getting out of your comfort zone, because although it's comfortable, you don't grow there.
Yeah.
There's one argument, however. A lot of
What?
people say growth isn't important.
Isn't it important?
Yeah.
Really?
I'll tell you why. So,
Okay.
so are you into spirituality by any chance?
What?
Or spirituality? Are you into spirituality by any chance?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Great. What kind? I mean, by what kind? I mean, do you have any practices, or do you have a guru or something?
So I grew up Catholic, but as I began my recovery journey, I started to dabble with just overall spirituality and kind of trusting the universe and that it's going to lead you to exactly where you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't exactly found an exact spiritual practice, but I'm kind of in the midst of finding my path, figuring out how I want to practice.
Yeah, so it's an Eastern form of spirituality. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So Buddha and Indian spirituality and these things. So Indian spirituality, interestingly, states that you don't really need to grow. All you need to do is be.
Okay.
Make sense? I'll explain.
Yeah.
So when you're just being, right? You are not the body. You're not the mind. You are a soul. What does the soul need? There are advanced spiritual practices that says you do not need to eat at all.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Yes. I mean, that's crazy, because if you literally look at our hierarchy of needs, food is at the bottom.
Exactly.
It's very essential to life.
Yeah.
So
if Maslow heard these guys, he would go crazy. What are you talking about, man? My hierarchy. It's based on food, guys. But yes, we exist. Yes. However, that's not what I'm trying to say. That's an extreme. All right. So let's not take an extreme as an example. They say that I have another interesting thing to talk about. Veganism. I want to talk about veganism with you. Yeah. Anyway, so they say that you do not need as much food, as much sleep, as much air, as much water as you think you do. These are all indulgences. All you need to do is satisfy your soul and be one with the universal energy. And in order to do this, growth is a man-made scenario.
Okay.
How does that make you feel? Growth is actually a man-made scenario, because that is comparison. And according to them, the purpose of your life is just to be.
I think that in a way, I agree with that, because I do think that you need to just let yourself be and let yourself live your life non-judgmentally. And I think that comes with a lot of acceptance of yourself and who you are and who you were meant to be. And a part of me thinks, well, if you do that, then you're inevitably going to grow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think they go hand in hand. So like a part of me does agree with that. And then a part of me also disagrees in a sense where if I just had let myself be when I was a teenager, I don't know where I would have gone, because I didn't know who I was or who I was supposed to be. Like when I was letting myself be, I didn't know what that was. And I think it took a lot of experimenting and stepping out of that comfort zone to be able to figure out who I was supposed to be. So I have conflicting thoughts on that, but I do, in a way I do agree with it. And I see a lot of different ways that could go.
Yeah. True. See, conflicting thoughts is all I wanted to have, because this was to provoke some thoughts. That's it. Nothing else.
Yeah, exactly.
If that happens, then perfect. Now, this one I really want to talk to you about. You say eating anything is fine. What's your view on veganism?
Veganism? I mean, I have some close friends that are vegans that also are able to intuitively eat. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's all about your intentions. I mean, if your intention behind veganism is to restrict food or lose weight, then I disagree with it. But if your intention behind veganism is something that doesn't have to do with dieting or restricting food and is your personal choice, and you can do it in a way where you're able to honor the 10 principles of intuitive eating, then by all means go for it. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it. It just depends on your intentions behind it.
That's an interesting take. You keep talking about these 10 principles. What's your favorite one?
10 principles?
Yeah.
My favorite principle, I think it's honoring your internal hunger cues. Because for me, it was so difficult for me to accept the fact that I might be hungry. because we show hunger in a lot of different ways. I mean, our bodies can't talk to us, so they communicate through a physical sensation.
Yeah.
So if I felt really fatigued or low on energy, it was very difficult for me to accept that I needed food. I mean, I would think, well, maybe I need to sleep, or maybe I should chug some water. And I think it was a hard pill for me to swallow, to just be like, you need to eat. And it took a while of discovering how my body communicates with me and what physical sensations mean what. But once I was able to figure it out, it was a lot easier and better for me to accept my own internal hunger cues and honor those.
You know, it's interesting how you're talking about this, and I would like to share something with you. A lot of guests that come on my podcast, they share their personal journey, and most of their struggles are overcome through self-work, rigorous, deep self-work and knowledge of self.
Yeah.
Do you think that's where we want to start? Just self-work, nothing else.
Yeah, I think it starts with understanding yourself and kind of breaking down where you came from and figuring out how you got to where you are now, and then figuring out how to get to where you want to be. I think it's a really dynamic, complex concept, but it definitely starts with figuring out yourself and doing that inner work.
Yes. I think that's it. So how did you get into mental health, and where do you actually want to be?
So, as I mentioned, I had orthorexia. And throughout my journey with orthorexia, I actually got a degree in exercise science. I became a certified personal trainer, a group fitness instructor, a certified fitness nutrition specialist, and a yoga instructor. So I put so much of my energy into the fitness world. And then, there's my cat.
Hi, cat.
Anyway, so I put so much energy into the fitness world. And when I got a job in mental health, I started to realize how much more passion I felt for it. And it almost felt like it was a waste of talent for me to be working in the fitness world when I had the capacity to help so many people with their mental health journeys. Because in the mental health field, we don't necessarily have enough people that understand it and get it and have been through it. So I felt like it was almost a disservice for me to be in the fitness world, where I could be making more of a difference and more of an impact in the mental health world. So I got a job in mental health, and I was doing it actually just to help a friend out who needed help at her job, in their mental health job. And I ended up loving it and finding that passion for it. And I slowly started to quit my fitness jobs and started to take on more hours in mental health. And here I am a year after that happened, and I'm in grad school now for mental health. I quit all my fitness jobs, and now I work full-time in mental health. So it kind of came about as an accident per se, but it turned out to be something really beautiful. And along the lines, I became a mental health speaker and started to share my story.
Life's beautiful accidents take you to places you always thought.
I love that.
Yeah. When you say mental health, what exactly do you do there? Are you a psychologist? Do you talk to people?
So I actually currently work at an eating disorder center, very similar to the one that I went to 6 years ago.
Okay, so what did you do there exactly? So they help you eat better, they talk to you. What is it? Is it talk therapy?
So the residents at the center that I work at, actually, they're admitted to live there, and they have individualized therapy, group therapy, and family therapy. And me as a counselor there, my role is to help them through some of the darkest moments in their recovery. So I'm there when they're eating the meals. I'm there after their really hard therapy session. I'm there after a really tough phone call with their brother. I mean, I'm there through the admission process where they're adjusting to a completely different lifestyle. I'm there when they're feeling so uncomfortable with their physical sensations. I mean, I just walk through them. I walk with them through their really dark times. And that's just my role. I just walk through that with them through that.
And what's your plan for the next few years? Where do you want to see yourself?
I mean, I'm currently in grad school for social work, and I'm going to eventually, I go back and forth because a part of me wants to start my own private practice and become a therapist. And another part of me wants to keep public speaking on mental health. And I could do both. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to go with it yet, but somewhere along those lines.
That's beautiful. Keeping up the positive attitude. So we started from 16, went through your journey, and now we're here. May I ask how old you are now?
I'm 23.
You're 23. Shit,
Yeah.
me too. Crazy.
Really?
Yes. Cool. That's
Who's
cool.
23?
He's 23. But yeah, it feels old sometimes. I miss my school days and all these things, but yeah.
Yeah. Adulting.
Happens to people.
It does.
We had an interesting journey from a shy, unsure of herself 16-year-old to confident mental health speaker, changing other people's life. And I had a wonderful time talking to you, Morgan. But before we end this podcast, I have 5 quick questions. These are going to be rapid fire, and I'm not going to let you think a lot while you're answering these questions, right? The first thing that comes to your mind, say it.
Okay. All right. I'm ready.
All right. Ready for it?
Yes.
All right. First question. What's the most courageous thing you've ever done?
Start speaking for mental health and telling my story to a lot of people when it was very hard for me to do that and actually speak out about my deepest, darkest struggles.
Yes, I must acknowledge that in this conversation itself, you did share things that are very intimate that I would never in my wildest dreams imagine myself sharing to a complete stranger. This is practically the first time you're talking with me. And yes, yeah. I love that courage. It's amazing. Right, great answer. Next one. What's your most treasured memory?
So I have a memory in my recovery where it was probably like 3 years into my recovery, and I was at a carnival with my brother and my best friend, and we were going on a bunch of rides, and we were laughing really hard on all the rides. And then after, we went to this candy store that was like on the boardwalk we were in Maine, and we went to the candy store and we got a bunch of candy, and then we sat outside the store and just ate some of the candy and laughed and went back on rides. And that was the first time in so long that I felt normal. Like I was eating something that I didn't plan hours ahead of time. I was okay with the fact that I was eating it. And I remember the memory of being with my brother and my best friend and enjoying that moment way more than even what kind of candy it was or how much of it I ate. Like I don't even remember that. And that was a huge turning point in my recovery, where I actually started to remember the memories I was making instead of the things that I was eating.
Yeah, I can feel sitting here how much that means to you. There's another question, but I will not ask you that. It's a great vibe. Don't want to spoil it. The next question was, what is the most terrible memory? But forget that. Next one. What is the funniest thing you've ever seen a stranger do?
Funniest thing I've ever seen a stranger do? Oh, man. That's a hard one.
Okay, I have one in my mind. It just popped up. So there's a beach in India called Goa. Have you heard about it?
Okay. No.
Anyway, so my friends and I planned to go to Goa. We went there. So we had a couple girls with us. And these girls weren't allowed to go out with boys. Kind of stereotypical. So they said, okay, fine. There are a total of 4 girls. You're going with them. Out of nowhere, the parents of these 2 girls wanted pictures. No, I want complete group pictures with all 4 of you in the picture. Guess what we did? There were 2 random girls walking on the beach. We approached them, asked them to pose for a picture, and they became our new friends from that picture. Right? Aww. So we shared the picture with these 2 random strangers, and that's how our trip was saved, and we didn't have to go back home. That's pretty funny. They were shocked. They had no idea what was happening. They're like, okay, why are these guys asking me to click pictures with us randomly? But yeah, that was it.
That sounds like a beautiful memory, though.
It is. I really, that was one of my only trips with my friends. I had like 2 or 3, but it was interesting. It was fun.
That does sound fun.
Yes. Last question.
Okay.
What would your perfect Saturday look like?
My perfect Saturday?
Mm-hmm.
I think it would start with letting myself sleep in past 7. And I think after that, I would probably wake up, and depending on how I was feeling, if I was feeling good, I would probably do some sort of intuitive movement, whether that's going to a gym or taking a walk outside or going for a hike or doing some yoga. I think movement just makes me feel good. I think I would nourish my body with all the foods that it wanted to have that day. I think I would spend time with my loved ones, my friends. I think I would make memories with them that had nothing to do with food or my body, and just like pure memories that I can remember how I felt and what I was laughing at and what I was doing and not what I ate. Because I think that's kind of what really makes a day for me, is knowing that I came far enough to a place where all I could remember was the exact things I ate, and now I can remember the actual day in the memory. So I think spending time with loved ones and honoring my body and my own mental health would be an ideal day for me.
Beautiful. I love how you have clarity, like the strongest amount of clarity. You're able to verbalize exactly what's going on in your brain, and it's so closely related to food, but it's so not related to food. It's also,
No, I get what you're saying.
yes, I love the intricacy of it. And yeah, that concludes the podcast. And thank you so much, Morgan, for blessing us with your wonderful set of 32. And
Thank you for having me.
your wonderful ideas, wonderful thoughts, the vibe. I loved it. And I must say, you do have an exceedingly is a negative term, an amazingly high EQ. Because when I was speaking with you, I could feel what you were saying. A lot of times people listen what others say. I could feel what you were saying. It connected with me. And I'm sure a lot of listeners will connect with it as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah,
Thank
thank you so much. And listeners, make sure you're following Morgan Hannaleck at Instagram. Check out her book on Amazon. It's linked in her bio. I'm going to do that immediately after this podcast. Have a great one. It is 8 p.m. now. I'm probably planning my sleep, and Morgan's going to start planning her day probably. Yes, and thank you so much for the podcast. Have a wonderful one.
Thank you.
All right.